Hey gang, Caleb Shaw, Shaw Realty. Welcome to our first virtual tax seminar. Guys, this is a work in progress. This whole COVID stuff, we're doing this. Last time we did it in person, had a good turnout. So we're gonna bring it to you on Facebook now. Hopefully you're seeing this across about 10, 12, 15 different pages. But we're gonna keep going. And if not, we will live post, or we will go back and we will add it to every single page that we miss. So without further ado, I'm Caleb Shaw, like I said, Shaw Realty, and I am joined with the great Miss Kinsey McGrew with Junek Consulting. Guys, the point of this seminar is to empower you, to give you the skills that you need to first understand your taxes, and then to protest them, and to set you up for victory, to go in there with the skills and the knowledge that you need to successfully win when you do that. It's not to bash them. It's not to call them names and throw stuff at them and all that, because I want to tell you right up front, and some of you guys are not going to want to hear this, but some of your houses are worth what they say they're worth. Some of them are, some of them aren't. We realize that, but you'll do a whole lot better if you walk in there kind and compassionate versus walking in with venom trying to fight everybody. And so, like I said, they have a thankless job. They have a job that most people wouldn't want. And I also, in my humble opinion, feel they're set up for failure. Texas is a non-disclosure state, which means we do not disclose our sales data. And so you have these appraisers that a lot of the times, they're basically blindfolded, and they have to come up with and they're not full-blown appraisers, but they have to come up with a piece of value for every single property in Victoria County. If you got 10 realtors and you got 10 appraisers and you gave them one property, you would get 20 different sets of value. And so it's important that we give them some slack, and we're kind. We seek truth, but we're kind and we're compassionate, and we do so. And so, that's all I really got on this note. I'm going to turn over the floor to Miss Kinsey, because she's way smarter at this than I am. And, and we'll go through that. We're going to kind of go through the forms, how to read the forms, how to understand them, how to fill them out. And then we'll go through some different lessons learned, questions she sees all the time, stuff like that. And then towards the end, we'll take your questions that you can submit on Facebook, and we will go from there. And so, let's get started. Miss Kinsey, how you doing?
Hi, I'm well. My name is Kinsey McGrew, and I'm a senior property tax consultant with Junek Consulting. We have a fantastic team of property tax consultants who are in relentless pursuit of making sure that our clients don't pay more than their fair share in property taxes. And I just want to thank Caleb for providing this opportunity to get this information out into the public. This is something that we do day in and day out, and I think a lot of us take for granted that most taxpayers don't understand the process, and we're here to shed a little light on what that looks like and how you can empower yourself and understand your rights as a taxpayer when it comes to protesting your value. So we're going to kind of start talking about some specifics, but still in a very general and broad overview of the process. But I do want to have a disclaimer that what we're talking about today is really geared toward residential properties, homeowners, that sort of thing. If you have a commercial property or a business personal property account, this really won't apply. And I highly recommend any commercial property owners go ahead and get some representation, because you are going to be needing different tools and experience to really fight those values. So again, this is really geared more toward the residential property owner. And if you have any questions, feel free to shout them out on Facebook or shoot an email to us, and we'll be happy to help. So the first thing we're going to go over is the fun piece of paper that everybody got in the mail, or most people got in the mail, that has their notice of appraised value. So the law is that the appraisal district doesn't necessarily have to send this if your property stayed the same or was $1,000 or less in an increase. So you want to pay attention to a few really important pieces of information. In the middle of the form of what you received, you're going to see something called structures and improvement value. One of our most frequent questions is, well, I didn't make any improvements to my property. What's the deal? I didn't improve it. How could they say my improvements went up 20 grand? Well, improvement is any improvement to the raw land. So, for example, this would be your house. This would be, pool, anything of that nature. It's not necessarily that you improved your property. It's just they're saying that the value of the improvements to your raw land have increased based on their mass appraisal techniques and valuation of your property.
So it's not because they put new mulch in the garden or they made that garden look spectacular, that's not going to cause their property values to rise.
Correct. So that's another common question is, well, my fence blew down and my trees in the hurricane and I put in a new flower bed. They're taxing me on my flowers. Your landscaping is not included in your valuation. So this is not that you painted your home, that you added some flowers, nothing of that nature. This is really going to be looking at the structures and improvements to the raw land. Another big line item that you really want to pay attention to is your total market value. There's a couple of different terms that you're going to see and that you really need to understand and pay attention to. One is your market value and one is your appraised or assessed value. The market value is what the property tax, the appraisal district is tasked with determining its value as of January 1 of each year. So that's what their opinion is of what that property would sell on January 1. Your appraised or assessed value, depending on the appraisal district, and fortunately the wording can kind of be different between appraisal districts, but you really want to look at the amount in the appraised or assessed column, especially if you have a homestead limitation, and that's the amount of value that you're going to be taxed off of. So you really want to pay attention to these figures and understand that if you see a discrepancy between your total market value and your assessed or appraised value, there's likely that you have a homestead cap coming into play. And you really want to pay attention because, like we've kind of gone over before, if you have that difference, you already kind of have a tax increase built in next year without you even really realizing it.
So can I, just to clarify this point, can I run a quick scenario? Let's say, to keep the math simple, the property was at $200,000. Well, let's say they jacked it up to $275 this year. Well, they won't be able to, you're not going to have to pay your full taxes on $275. So will you kind of explain how that 10% kicks in and so those two kind of come together a little bit?
So the tax code has provisions for property owners' protection to make sure that their taxes that they're paying out of their pocket according to their value don't increase more than 10%. So anything that the appraisal district feels is they say your market value is X. Well, if that's 10% above what your last year's value is, you're only going to get taxed on that 10% increase. The rest will hang out and kind of in the homestead cap until that slowly eats away year over year, depending on that discrepancy.
So let's just, using that same scenario, the house was at 200, they put it to 275. Let's say we lose our protest. Well, I'm not going to do math in public, but let's just hypothetically, 10% of that is what, 215. We'll just throw out a number. So if it just stayed the same all those other years until it caught up to that 275, every year there would be 10%, 10%, 10%, and that would be on top of any new gains. That would be, just keeps going basically.
Exactly. Until that homestead cap is eaten up, you're going to be paying still based off of that market value.
Yeah, and they only get that if they filed their homestead exemption, which is from January 1 until April 30th?
Yes, you have up to 2 years to file that if you've missed the deadline. So if you've just recently changed, moved to a new residence, you're going to need to file a homestead exemption application and a copy of your driver's license, and that can go back up to 2 years to provide some relief for the years that you
Which is important because if they didn't, that 10% does not apply, correct? Or
exactly.
Does it?
You aren't protected under the homestead cap and homestead limitation if you have not filed that exemption.
Good. So they would have to pay on 275, not 200 if they don't do that.
Exactly.
So homeowners do that. It's very important. And if you don't understand that or what that means, reach out to the realtor that helped you sell the house or call any real estate company or even call the appraisal district. They'd be happy. I went in there recently and they did it for a client and they backdated it. They were very nice and helpful on it. And so reach out if you don't understand what that is.
And that also, the homestead cap or homestead exemption really provides tax relief within the taxing entities. So you get a little bit of a break on your ISD, and then there's some elective amounts reduced from the taxable value. So that's really where that comes into play. Very important to have. If you've recently turned 65, go ahead and resend them that driver's license and make sure that they know that you are 65, and then you can also have some additional tax relief with tax ceilings.
Yeah, okay.
So we've kind of gone over these important things you need to know, exemptions in play. One of the main things I want people to understand and that we get calls on as well is right here where it says total estimated tax. This number is based off of the previous year's tax rate. So what I want everybody to understand in looking at this, you may think, oh, okay, well, my taxes, are X amount. Well, your tax bill is likely to look a little bit different because of the appraisal process. The tax rates typically go up. I've very rarely seen them go down, which is a whole nother talking point. But I think that that's something that people really need to pay attention to is even though this is the number you're thinking you're going to pay off of, this is an estimate and it is based off of the previous year's tax rate. And new tax rates aren't established until later in the year. And
that's a good point that I forgot earlier is, I know when these notices go out that everybody gets extremely worked up and angry at the CAD and everybody wants to jump in their cars and go over and fist fight everybody at the CAD. Their job, like I said, is only to assign a value to every piece of property. Then it's the other politicians that a lot of them hide behind their desk and they keep raising that tax rate higher and higher and higher. With the same intensity that you guys, light up the CAD all the time, you need to go light up these politicians to keep raising the taxes on you too, because that tax rate is multiplied by the value that CAD comes up with. And that tax rate, the value will get you, but if the tax rate's high and the value's high, the double getting you. So, make sure you hold your politicians accountable for the higher taxes. And unless you're mad at your money, then don't worry about it. But, I just want to be fair that it's not all CAD. They are half the puzzle. And the politicians raising taxes are the other half. So go ahead. Sorry, I had to get in my tax thing.
Yeah, we went over this in our previous talk, and we'll kind of hit on that again in a few moments. But the last thing that you need to pay attention to on this appraisal notice that you received or may have received is the deadline for filing protest. It's May 15th or 30 days after the appraisal notice was mailed. So pay attention to that date. Make sure you circle it. Understand how important it is because this process is very driven off of deadlines and you need to be aware of it because if you don't get your protest in on time, there are very few circumstances that come into play that would allow you to open a protest hearing for this year. So
and they're running on time with these, so doesn't matter about COVID, it doesn't matter, get your papers in on time.
Exactly. There are some counties in our surrounding areas that the appraisal notices came out a little bit later, so they will be later than May 15th. But Victoria, Jackson, several of the other surrounding counties are adhering to the standard May 15th deadline.
Okay, copy that.
So we've kind of gone over this in talking with the exemptions. I want people to understand another frequently asked question. I have an over 65 exemption. Should I still protest? My taxes are frozen, so really it doesn't affect me. There's very minimal change based on those tax ceilings on the entities that aren't frozen. So our advice is to protest. If your property is going to be inherited to your kids, like I just got several calls this past week. Man, I just inherited my parents' properties and I just got their appraisal notice and wow, these taxes are so much higher than we could have ever anticipated. We can't afford to keep this property now. What can we do to reduce this value? It's important to keep up with it because even though your taxes aren't changing, your market value very well may be, and you want to stay on top of it because again, once that exemption comes off, you're paying full market or, maybe the exemption status changes and you don't want to be caught off guard with a really hefty tax bill on something that just went unchecked for years and years.
And I may be skipping ahead or stepping on your toes here, but you know my line in the deal here. Have you already, in filling out this form, are we to my suggested line yet that you told me about?
No, so let's go into the next part. So okay. You've received this, you're fuming, you're not sure, you just don't know. Our take is that unless you've seen the data and understand the circumstances and information in play regarding your property valuation, everybody should protest whether it went up, down, stayed the same. And if you didn't receive a notice, go ahead and give the appraisal district a call and just understand, yes, did my property stay the same, or look on the website. And then that way you have an understanding of your timeline.
Because if that letter got lost in the mail, because like you said, if the property did not be raised by over $1,000, they don't send it out. But if it was raised by over $1,000 and they did send it out, and let's say, your dog ran off with your mail and ate it, because I found some of my mail in the backyard that my dogs ate, but let's say they ran off with your tax statement and they ate it and you didn't know, that's on you. And if you don't if that thing gets lost in the mail, your dog eats it, for whatever reason, you don't fill that thing out and turn it in, it's not their fault that it got lost in the mail, it's your fault. So if you didn't get that letter, call and verify that it's because your property values didn't go up 1,000, because if that thing is lost in the mail, you're going to pay for it. So
exactly. So you get this, you're fuming mad, you're just wanting more information, whichever way. Now it's time to file and consider your preparation for protest. So there's a standard form that the comptroller provides that you received likely with your appraisal notice that is your standard notice of protest. That needs to be filed with the appraisal district at their mandated timeline according to your appraisal notice. And there's some important information on the appraisal notice or notice of protest that you'll want to pay attention to. So really, this could be done on a handwritten letter. This is just a provided form to make sure that all of the information is there. But you really want to just make sure you identify yourself as the owner, the property ID, or identifying information for the account or multiple accounts. And then the most important thing is to look in Section 3. There's multiple boxes you can check on your reason for protest. So the two that should be protested at a minimum every single year is incorrect appraised or market value and value is unequal. So what that means is that based on sales, your property is incorrectly appraised, or based on fairness, your property is either equally or equally appraised with similar properties. So the importance of this is if you forget to check one of those boxes and you go in and do your protest and you're giving them all of these sales and gosh, this absolutely shows my value should be reduced. Well, unfortunately, if you only checked the unequal box, then everything you've provided is irrelevant because you are saying that your reason for protest is that you're unequally appraised. So always pay attention to that. And there's several other options. And my recommendation would be if you have, an exemption issue or any other of the boxes that are categorized there, check them that all that may apply. That way you have the opportunity to discuss those in a protest that you may not realize are important, but you really want to make sure that you're protesting both of those things, and we'll kind of talk more about that as we get into the evening. But
so you can get in a jam if you check too few boxes, but not in a jam for checking too many boxes.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So in my opinion, I think it's worth taking the time to really understand your property's needs and your specific issues and making sure that you've checked all appropriate boxes.
Because it could be a combination, two things could be true at one time, right? It could be a combination of multiple things. And so, yeah.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And so you file the protest. When you're doing that, go ahead and make a request for evidence. So the property tax process is really supposed to be based on its mass appraisal. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at this, there could be some issues with the data or maybe some things that you want to bring up. But the appraisal district will need to have supporting evidence to support their valuation. So when you're filing that protest, go ahead. It can be as simple as I request evidence for my property, or we can also post some language that we can use, just asking for the information that was used in determining your value and any information that will be used in any hearing for any issue it matters. So,
because I thought that was great. It's a lot easier to rebuttal or see where they're coming from when you get the numbers put in front of you, and that makes it a whole lot easier to pick something apart when, well, yeah, you're comparing me to this house that's been 100% remodeled and flipped, and mine still needs all of that stuff.
Of course.
And so, no, that's outstanding. Okay.
So we've talked about your appraisal notice. You filed the protest. That's always the most important thing. Once you get that going, have the request for evidence in. They have to provide that 14 days in advance of your protest hearing. So that gives you a little time to get your ducks in a row on looking at different methods of protesting your property. So when you're looking at preparing for your protest, there's really several angles you can look at as far as reducing your value or making sure that you're appropriately appraised. So the first step, just like we talked about on the protest, is you can look at sales. So with sales, I'm going to say red star, proceed with caution. You really want to make sure that the sales you are going to use or provide are, number one, legit, actual sales that you've received through an appropriate source that can testify to their accuracy. This would be a realtor or someone along those lines that has access to these closed sales. You're not going to use list prices, and you also want to make sure that they're within an appropriate time frame. So
that's something to clarify that a lot of people, when they call me, well, my neighbor sold his house last week for this. Well, that doesn't matter. We're talking last year, January 28th,
yes,
or 2019
or as close
through December 31st,
exactly,
2019.
And they can go back up to 24 months, but as close to that 12-month time frame as you can get, the better, or the closer to the date of appraisal. So if a property next door that was the same exact age, floor plan, size, that sort of thing, then of course I think that they would be willing to consider that sale, even though it's outside of that January 1.
Unless it's a repo, foreclosure.
Has to be an arm's length sale.
Okay. Yeah, and that's important because if you try to go in there and argue with all the foreclosures, you're going to lose that one.
Exactly.
So gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're going to get into the sales a little bit more as we move on, but that is one method, and it's one that most people gravitate to. But there are so many nuances and things that you just need to be aware of when you're preparing, if that's the angle that you choose to use.
And it kind of sucks, as a realtor, because we think we're helping, and we are too. We're helping one neighbor, but we're potentially hosing the other neighbors, and that's where it gets as a struggle for me, because of course I want to help my clients, of course. But I don't want to hose the rest of the neighborhood and screw up their values. And now that I step back and I look, I kind of feel like a lot of the, what the appraisal district almost banks on is realtors, exactly, throwing out all those values and this may be another virtual thing, but how do we get around that, And so, but anyway, go ahead.
Sure. And the appraisal district does get sales information, whether it's from realtors, other consultants, fee appraisals. So they have sales letters. There's other ways of them getting that information. And so don't feel like it's all on you to be.
But do they really? I mean, do they dig in? I mean,
absolutely.
I guess my question is if they are doing that, how are they so far off on so many, if they have that, for example, when I bought my house, it was there, it was whatever. Well, then it shoots up 60 plus grand and then get it right back to, here's what I paid for it. Okay, fine. They listened to me. But then here we are this year and it's gone right back up to where it was previously. And it's like, I know there's nothing is sold within 30, 40,000 in my neighborhood ever of what they're saying that the properties are worth. So how do they, if they are in fact looking at those documents, if they are in fact using those, how the heck are they so, $30,000, $40,000 over anything that's ever sold there, ever.
We're going to touch base on this, but every time someone comes in with sales, after that informal or formal hearing, that appraiser or whoever received those documents is going to take them straight to data entry. They're going to get it into their system, flag it for inspection, flag the sales price, and that's automatically going to be pulled into their data from next year. So that's an automatic thing. That's how they keep the information churning. So
can you give them the comps and block out the property number and just leave the street and, or put, instead of 207, just the 2 and because I don't want to do the, I don't want to hose one neighbor to, you know what I'm saying?
But it's all about adjustment. So you'd have to look at that property's specific characteristics, and you'd have to have that information in order to make that adjustment to the subject property. So
but they don't have that information.
They do, if you provide it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
so,
fair enough. All right.
That's just something to look at when using the sales method for your protest. And you can kind of look at each of these, see what makes the most sense for you and your property and its circumstances. The other thing you can look at is unequal appraisal. So say we live in a homogeneous neighborhood, all houses built around the same time, very few options of floor plans, and same neighborhood. We're very similar. You're valued at 100 grand, I'm at 150. Well, that isn't fair. And so the tax code allows for property owners to be equally assessed. So if you go in and
they're just gonna bring me up to 150 and leave,
maybe next
leave
year.
you there.
But they're there to make sure that everything is uniform and equal. So if you know that that situation has occurred in your area, and again, we've got to be clear that you're looking at actual similar properties. You can't be looking at the one guy in the house, the neighborhood that has the smaller house or the much larger house, something like that, because there's different schedules that go into play that could affect their values and different features that come into play.
Okay.
So you really want to pay attention. Is he truly similar? You can look this up by going to the Appraisal District website, making sure that the characteristics match up, size, that sort of thing. And of course, if it's your neighbor, you know that he's going to be in a similar area. So do that, take photos of their property. That's another angle you can look at. So you have sales, you have unequal, how I'm valued compared to my neighbors. Another popular way that people like to choose as a DIY method for their protest is there's something wrong with my property method. Mm-hmm. So you're going to look at issues with your property that are not assumed throughout depreciation. So if you have a 1968 house that it has the same effective year as a 1968 house, that depreciation is already going to be built into your value. So you don't want to go in there and be like, I have an old house, and they're going to say, well, yeah, we show that you're an old house, so therefore, that's not a good argument. What you're really going to be looking at in that method is, do you have foundation issues? Do you have inadequate plumbing that just keeps backing up, and you have these really big issues that, think of something that you would disclose when you sell your property.
Say, my house, I bought a house and had a pool in it, but you couldn't swim in the pool because it had all this fiberglass in there. It looked pretty, but if it was not functional other than just to hold water, because if you got in there, you get all itchy and all that kind of stuff. So I went and got I had 2-3 different guys give me estimates what it would cost to fix. And so when I went in there and, they had the pool value, whatever, I said, I can't even swim in this thing. Here's the thing on it, and here's one, and so
Absolutely.
Is that an example of what you're talking about?
100%. And so that'll adjust the value of the pool. Mm-hmm. So if you have additional features, you want to look at that as well. But the evidence you'd provide in that sort of situation is a estimate that you've gotten from a reputable contractor, mm-hmm. And some photos. So again, this is, big ticket item things that aren't typical of your property age and that sort of thing that would already be kind of hammered in. And
you're probably going to say this, but since you said items and stuff and on the pool, I noticed one of the things in addition to being charged for the pool is they had a diving board on there. They had the pool, well, I didn't have any of those things, and then mm-hmm. I started looking a little bit further, and there's an outbuilding that I don't have and things like that. So that's another thing that I would suggest, and I'm sure you were getting to it, and I just jump ahead because I get excited, but people need to examine and be very clear that the things on their property that they're being charged for, they actually have. And then to take it a step further, correct me if I'm wrong, they also want to check the code or the status of it, for lack of, because if you got a 30, 40-year-old porch that's rotting, but they're classifying it as a new porch and giving it full value, you want to address that also, correct?
So the very last thing, you've looked at sales, you're getting all your ducks in a row in preparation of your protest. You looked at sales, you've looked at how you're compared to your neighbors. You've looked at any defects of your property that wouldn't be typical or accounted for in a depreciation schedule. The last thing you're going to do is finally this evidence that you've requested will come back to you. And you've checked the sales box and you checked the equity box. So what this is going to look like is you're going to receive what's called an appraisal card. That's a very top piece usually of your evidence packet. So this is where you're going to look for all of your property's information, characteristics, a sketch of your house. Here's where you want to just pay attention to what's going on with your property. Does my square footage look right? Are they saying that I have, segments that I don't? Or are they saying that I have a barn that I don't have?
And those mistakes are made a lot, guys. So don't just assume that it's correct, because a lot of these things are wrong often. To err is human, and we make mistakes. And I fat finger stuff all the time when I suck at typing, and so I'm trying to type and I hit the wrong button, don't catch it till I hit post, and it's like, oh crap, now I got to go back and fix it. And so that happens a lot. It's not like they're, I hope they're not. I don't think they are. That they're just trying to make things up to get you. It's somebody at some point probably had it, and it's just never been updated or taken off, or it is a mistake.
And remember, this is mass appraisal. They are not going out and appraising every single piece of property. They'll on occasion do some field checks or do some site inspections on a reappraisal or something of that nature, but not every single year are they going out to every property, taking photos, that sort of thing. So just check the information on your property, make sure it's correct. The next things you're going to want to look at are the sales and equity grid. So we talked about this. You've gotten this information, you've requested this information, but what does this mean? So when you get this, do not get intimidated. Where property tax consultants really differ from, even realtors or the typical taxpayer is we're well-versed in appraisal methods and concepts, and we're also well-versed in the property tax code and the way things should be done according to the code and also to standard appraisal practices. So when you get this, I know you're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to go, oh, okay, what does this mean? Okay, their value must be right because they have
Junek
all this.
And just let them handle it. I'm over this crap.
If you get to that point, we're here to help. But don't get overwhelmed and just try and take a breath. And there's some kind of big overarching things that you need to pay attention to when you look at this. So, this is a sales comp grid that was provided for a property last year. When you get the grid, okay, you're going to see your property, and then you're going to see the comparable properties that the appraisal district is using. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. When you provide a sale or when a sale is used, it's going to, then you're going to adjust your subject based on that comparable. So understand that if you provide a sale that is not truly comparable, it very well could indicate an increase in your value. So you have to pay attention to what you're providing and understand how the math works and that there are mathematics and statistics going on behind the scenes.
Well, and I was going to ask that is using the scenario of, let's say my taxes actually went down, but I still protest them. There is the possibility that I could walk in there and they get raised on me?
Not necessarily. There are a few circumstances where that would happen.
Because I've had clients that, and I don't mean to overtalk you, but I've had clients that have called me and they went down to their protest and they call and how'd it go? It went terrible. Like, they tried to, they talked to the guy and he said, I can come out and look at you, because they wanted him to come look at the property. And he said, yeah, no, I can come out and look at the property, but you need to know if I do, I could actually come out there and raise it higher on you. And do you really want to risk that? And they were, well, no. And so, and I didn't like that was
the tone is nasty. Mm-hmm. But what they have to understand is the appraiser is making objective determinations on the characteristics of your home, and then it's, again, mass appraisal. So everybody just has to remember that just because this sale is X or Y, or just because you feel that your value should be lower, doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the evidence indicates. And that's where you really just need to pay attention or hire a professional to look at these things, because the information you provide very well could be damning, but an appraiser making a threat about it is maybe an inappropriate way to handle that. But
I want to say, though, I have not gotten a lot of these complaints recently. And when I first started 11 years ago, they were rampant, and they were. I experienced some. Just a guy I just wanted to headbutt when I was done over there, because he told me that he determined market value. Not what somebody will pay for a house. And I was like, you're trying to tell me that you sitting right here in this office, you determine market value. And he's like, that's right. And if I say it's gone up 50%, then it's gone up 50%. I was like, you're full of it, And then I had another one that told me, same guy actually, that told me that the condition of my house did not matter, but I had a big house. And I was like, it's a big piece of crap right now. It needs, that's why I was able to afford it at $90,000, because it needed a ton of stuff. And he's like, no, it doesn't matter. And I said, you're really telling me the condition doesn't matter here? And he said, yeah. And I said, I'll take this fight all day long. And then I lost. And so but again, this was years ago. And my last several experiences, I will say that the young lady was very kind. Everybody was kind when I walked in, and it was a different experience. And so I want to be fair to them that, these stories have come from past years. And recently I haven't heard very many nightmares out of there. So I want to be fair.
We hear it all.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying they're not there. I'm not saying they're not there, but I just want to be fair.
The highlight of this all is the values are based on evidence, either the appraisal district's evidence or your evidence. And really what you got to come into this looking at is their evidence more, is it better than mine? So are their comparables more similar to my property? than I'm providing. Or hey, is there some middle ground? Maybe they have a really high comp in here. Maybe they could substitute that with one of the sales that you provide and try and get that value down that way. So there's different ways to look at it. But again, this is all based on evidence. I saw a post the other day of a guy just saying, go in there and say that there's no way that my property is worth what they're saying it is. Well, no, you still need evidence to support your opinion, and this is all opinions. So this really is your opinion and the appraiser's opinion, and kind of trying to compile all the evidence that you can to make the most appropriate judgment call on your property.
And I would, and this, we never discussed this, but I would, if I recall correctly from looking at statistics, is, your best shot is with that first person that you meet of having any luck, because I read some board statistics or something that, like, once you go to that board, that I think 75% of the time, or 80, I mean, it was they stick with it, they don't change their mind. Like, once you go from that, whoever you're sitting with, that first negotiator, once it goes onto the board, I read some deal that 79% of the time they hold to, they don't. There's very small times that they actually change their mind. And
this is something we'll get into, but one thing that people need to really understand is there's really two things. You have an informal meeting or informal hearing with the appraiser where you discuss your property values. Then there's a formal hearing with the appraisal review board. The appraisal review board does not work for the CAD. They are paid for by the CAD, but they are supposed to be a unbiased third-party person to come in and really listen to both sides of the argument and make a determination.
Yeah, that's a whole nother, we'll get into later, but I do find it odd that there's a member of all the taxing entities that sit on the board that hire the people. Like that seems like a conflict of interest there, that the people that are making sure they get that money are on the board that selects the people. That
and
seems
that's
like
a statewide.
It's not just Victoria, you're right, but it's still statewide. It still feels like an incestuous little circle they have going there that makes sure
it makes it tough for people to feel heard or for people to feel like they can go get
because the very people that are taking your money are the ones that make the call ultimately whether or not well, of course they always get theirs.
Sure, and there are some great ARBs that are really there to listen and are there on behalf of the taxpayer. And then you get in some where it feels very much like they're rubber stamping the appraisal district. So just proceed with caution. Know that you have different remedies for either. But to jump
real quick, guys, I don't know if you can hear this or not. I don't know how much it's picking up. We're not spitting on each other or anything. It's raining pretty hard now, and we got a metal roof. So if you're hearing a lot of sight, there's not a football game going on in the background or anything. It's raining on our metal roof. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It got really loud all of a sudden, so I didn't know what they could hear or not hear.
To jump back to our sales grid, when you're looking at this, the evidence the appraisal district provided, again, you're kind of going to look at this the way you treated when you were looking for your sales comps. Make sure that they're in the same neighborhood as you or a very similar neighborhood. Make sure that it's in similar square footage range. Make sure that it's similar class. Make sure that all of these things make a difference in how that's going to be affecting your property.
Because you're not going to do like a Tuscany house versus a Tanglewood house for comparables, apples and oranges.
I would not think that would be comparable.
Yeah, so I don't think the appraiser would either.
The other thing that I would really like for taxpayers to understand is this is not gospel. You get this, it looks very professional, and it's intended to be used as such. But for the last 2 years, we've found that the math doesn't necessarily add up. So again, another difference between a taxpayer going in and a realtor, someone that doesn't have access to the tools, experience, data that we do, is you're really having to take their word for it that these adjustments are appropriate. So take a quick minute, make sure the math adds up, and if it doesn't, ask for an explanation. They're very well-versed in what they're supposed to be doing. They're well-trained, or they should be. And so let's make sure that this math adds up, because if the math doesn't work on the appraisal district's data, there's no way that your value is correct. So you might go in there and feel like, wow, I got a $10,000 reduction. I really won. I just saved my day. Well,
still 40,000 over.
Exactly. And so you really want to pay attention, because again, most people don't have access to the information to make the adjustments and understand to the dollar like we can what that property value should be. So again, make sure that the math works, because you're putting a lot of faith in a software system that is not provided by the state, like some people may suggest, it's not provided by the state. You just want to make sure that you're checking that, because you're putting a lot of faith in these numbers working out correctly. So sales, you're going to do the same thing with equity. Make sure that they're in your neighborhood. The equity grid should be very, very similar to your property. This is where you're looking at homes in your neighborhood that are same year, same size, that kind of thing. When you're looking at these and you start seeing any big, huge adjustments, when you go down to the very bottom and you see the net adjustment starts to become 30, 40, 50 and above percent.
They're reaching.
I would say that is not a comparable property. And again, all of this is based on data, so you want to make sure, does the appraisal district's evidence support the valuation of my home? If not, in my opinion, it shouldn't have changed. So I think that there's a lot of room for adjustment, and you have these 4 angles to look at, again, throughout your process to see what benefits you in your circumstances the most. Then you've had all your ducks in a row, you're prepared, you're ready to go to your hearing. You're either going to meet with an appraiser informally or go to an ARB hearing. With the times right now with COVID, a lot of appraisal districts are moving to online. My only fear with that is that some of the subjective information might be more difficult to relay. They might not necessarily be looking immediately at the photos that you sent, or it might be harder to have that conversation that you would in person. So again, if you have questions, even if it's over email, try and spell it out as much as you can, but still be brief and respectful of their time, that you're sticking to the point, you're sticking to the value. And the last kind of tip I would say on preparing for your protest is remember that they are not there to talk about taxes. You might come in there going, my taxes are way too high. The appraisal district, again, is there just to establish value. So don't come in there to the appraiser or the appraisal review board and say, my taxes are too high, you need to help me. They're there to talk only about value, and that value is based on January 1. So today is irrelevant. If your house burned down, you would hope that they would have some consideration for that if it happened, January 3rd, but that appraisal day is January 1st. And unfortunately, in Texas, there hasn't been a overall stance on COVID and its implications on property owners. So again, you're not going to be able to use that really as a protest argument.
I don't think they ever lower taxes. The one thing that would help everybody the most lowering taxes is the one solution that we won't discuss, that won't be brought up. They'll float small business loans, they'll float all this, we'll get into the banking business, but cut taxes, what? I don't understand what you're saying.
Sure, and you hit on it in the beginning. There's 2 sides of the appraisal equation on how you arrive at your taxes due, your value multiplied by your tax rate. So once you go through this process, remember that this doesn't mean your tax bill is finalized. The taxing entities are then going to take the certified appraisal rolls and start working on their budgets and establishing their tax rates.
Then they got to figure out how much they're in the black or the red on this.
Exactly, and what they have going on. So you still need to be a part of the process. You still need to be talking to taxing entities and asking them for some additional relief, either by keeping the tax rate the same, lowering it, because if property values are going up, that property rate, the tax rate should not be going up as well. So hold them accountable and just make sure you're having the conversation.
Yeah, and guys, I don't know if you know or not, but when you look on there, there's 7, 8 taxing entities on there, and everybody gets mad at the city and stuff like that. But I think VISD takes about 63 or 67% of the tax statement. VISD gets more than double what the city does. And so then you hear these things, we need another bond, or like after Harvey, when VISD did that, that backdoor on the tax thing that they stuck on the public, where they backdoored everybody to that emergency 12 cents or whatever it was that they tacked on. And so, again, I know I keep hammering that point, but again, everybody goes after the CAD all the time. This is the biggest set of calls that I get in a year is when these tax statements go out. My clients call me and my phones melt until May 15th and all this is done. But I haven't had any calls saying, hey, what's my councilman's number? What's the mayor's number? All these people, VISD, school board, raising taxes over and over again and sticking you with this backdoor tax. I don't ever feel the same intensity to go after the politicians, and they're very happy to hide under their desk and point at the CAD and send you over there and get all worked up with them. Split that fury where it is aimed and hold these politicians accountable. Okay, I'm done. Sorry. Hold the politicians accountable.
That's going on in Dallas County right now too with the judge. But okay, so you have everything ready. You're ready to go to your either informal or formal hearing. If you get in there with the appraiser or email and you guys just cannot see eye to eye on where that value should be, they say, I can't do anything, you feel like it's still incorrect, you have the right to take that to the ARB. So you can still proceed in through the process. You don't have to establish it there with the appraiser. And in my opinion, you're not doing yourself any favors. If you don't feel that value is correct, you deserve to be heard and you deserve to have it corrected. So I recommend then, if you can't come to an agreement, go ahead and go and see the ARB, present your evidence, and see where the panel lands on it for you. So in settling your value, there's two different ways you can do it. In the informal, you have what's called a settlement and waiver. That document, once you sign it, there's no further remedy. You can't pursue litigation, arbitration. You have signed off saying, I am okay with this value. Go ahead and certify me at this value. I want people to pay attention to that because I've heard from several different people in different counties that all of a sudden the appraiser sends the settlement and waiver. The property owner thought that they were going to send additional photos to the appraiser for further adjustments. Didn't realize that by signing that, it was over. So just be clear that once you sign a settlement and waiver with the appraiser in an informal hearing or an informal setting, that is done. If you go to an appraisal review board,
don't, I see this a lot too, where they've been jacked up $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And then, hey, we'll come down $1,000 or $5,000, and they're like, I got them down $5,000. Well, great, you're still $45,000 over, and so.
Yeah, did you really win?
Yeah, like if they break you off the chump change and you don't think that's where you're supposed to be, toe the line, and is it fun to have to argue with them? No, well, unless you like that stuff, but not normally. Is it fun to go to the ARB? No, it can be intimidating. It can be all those things, but if you don't protect yourself, if you haven't hired them, if you're doing this, you need to fight that fight. Otherwise, what was the point of going? And if you allow yourself to be steamrolled, you will be steamrolled. And it's even if you go through the process and get your butt kicked, you went through the process. The hats off to the man in the arena. And you gain valuable insight by going in there. And even if, like I said, go in there and get your butt kicked. You may not want to do it again. You can call them, or you can get calloused and learn and adjust and go back next year. And maybe you hand them their butts. And so, but. Don't let fear hold you back. Fear is a liar. Do not let fear keep you from doing things. Again, nobody wants to go in and argue. I do this for a living, and I don't like going in and argue. Well, I kind of do, but even I can get nervous and all that kind of stuff. And so, but you got to put that foot forward and take that step. And if you don't protect your rights and your freedoms, and nobody else is going to, and government is all too happy to just scoop it up. It is up to you to defend that. It is up to you to do those uncomfortable meetings. Or hire somebody. But either way, it's still got to be fought or they win automatically. Sorry, I'm done. I don't like taxes. Sorry, go ahead.
If you don't like the proposed value in the informal hearing, you can go to the appraisal review board. The type of settlement that comes out of their appraisal review board is called a notice of determination. So they have heard the evidence, they've ruled on the value. You're going to get a determination in the mail. If you still do not agree with the value that the appraisal review board has determined for your property, you still have two remedies, three really, but two that are appropriate. Arbitration or litigation. So I just want people to be clear that I got so many calls last year of, I just went to my hearing, they didn't listen to me, how can you help me? And unfortunately, it was too late for us to step in and take the appropriate action, provide the appropriate evidence to help them. So just be cognizant of the fact that once you go in there, it's not said and done, but it's very expensive in some cases to then proceed with the different remedies. So just be aware.
And it can go bad in there. It's been 3-4 years, but if not a little bit longer, but I played the process all the way out. And, I very humbly think I walked in there and whooped them. I felt like I whooped them on facts. I felt like I just they were comparing my house that needed everything to the only 2 remodels in the entire neighborhood that they were using to set the curve on everything. And when I walked in, the houses that were used against me, one I had listed and sold, and the other one I brought the buyer for. So I had intimate knowledge of both of these properties, and I told them as such. And I got the deer in the headlight looks like, oh crap, he just whooped our butts in here. And then the guy at the end, well, I vote to make it one, I second, all right, Mr. Shaw, we're done. What do you mean we're done? Like, we're not even within 40,000 of each other. What do you, well, you could pick up your arbitration package on the way out. And it was a very frustrating feeling because I felt like I had everything on my side. And that quickly, they just, I'm done. And because there was 10 other people they wanted to get to. And I didn't feel like truth was heard. I didn't feel, like I said, I felt very, and I'm biased, but I'm also not blind. And I seek truth. And I felt like I walked in and whooped them. And then I got beat and sent packing, you know. And I, that same time, I came out of there a little bit hot. And a young lady grabbed me in the hallway when I was coming out. And again, I want to preface, this is at least 3-4 years ago, you know, at least. But she grabbed me and she was real nervous. And she said, Caleb, I can tell it didn't go well in there for you. And I said, no, I'm ticked off. Those morons don't know what they're doing. And I was all mad. And she goes, well, I just got an actual appraisal. She said, we just refinanced our house. And she was holding it in her hand. And I saw the appraiser. It was a good appraiser in town. And she's like, I just got this appraisal. And she goes, they wouldn't even look at it. She goes, I tried to show the guy, and he just said that his numbers were better than mine, and he wouldn't even look at it. And she got an actual appraisal, you know, and they wouldn't even look at it. And so, and granted,
that's tough.
That's what she told me, but it was right after I came out of my meeting where I got slapped around when I stood in truth. And so, you know, I don't say that to scare people, but I also want to be honest with people and let them know. And again, this is 3-4 years ago, so it may be different people on the boards, it may be different whatever, but you may have everything in there and you may still lose. And that doesn't mean don't fight, you know. And so I just want to be honest and let people know that, you know, you may not win even if you do everything right, but you still need to fight.
Our team of consultants, we have been doing this for years and years and years. And I think that's something that's people need to understand is we know what we're up against. We see the systemic problems. We see the issues with data. And people need to understand that this is a lot more than just what meets the eye. It's possible to DIY, but there's so much more into it. So if you ever do run into a situation where something just is over your head, you don't understand, you don't know how the code applies to your property or how the sales might actually impact your value differently than you think, it's in your interest. It's in your interest to go ahead and get some help, especially like, you know, people like us. We have skin in the game, and we're there to make sure that you succeed. Our goals align, and if you need help, seek help.
Well, and that's something, guys. The skin in the game that she mentions that I think is very important that people understand is I don't, you know, hey, here's $100, go fight my taxes. That's not the way it works. If you go in there on my behalf and you don't win, I don't owe you anything.
Exactly.
It's a wash, it's free. But if you go in there and you do win, you only get a percentage of what you save me, correct?
Exactly. So we work off of a contingency fee, and that really does help to make sure that our goals align. If you're going through this process and you are looking at hiring a consultant, I would steer clear of any flat fees because they've gotten their money and they can do whatever they want. Our goals align completely with our client. So if we don't save you any money, we don't send you a bill. And I think that that's something that's really important is we put significant time into our clients' properties, and we want those values to be correct, but you still have to have evidence. We can't just will them to be lowered.
Right.
There has to be the evidence. You have to put in the legwork. And I think that with the information we provided, people do have a leg up on how to be successful in protesting their properties and kind of understanding a little bit of what is in play. Again, this is a very general overview, and if any people have specific questions, they can get with us. But yes, we don't charge people unless we save them money.
Well, and it makes sense. And in the same breath, when I tell you to fight and to do all these things, you know, I guess there's some wisdom to knowing your own limitations too. And you know, like I have a wonderful CPA because I'm not going to do, like, I don't understand my taxes. I don't understand 27 pages of tax code to figure out how to do my deal. So I hire somebody because I know that I can't do that, you know, and so just like the same way I'll never outcook my wife, and you know, I mean, she's good, you know, and so it, you know, and I guess knowing while I preach fighting all the way through, it's you're still fighting if you just get somebody better than you to do it. So, and I know, my parents use you guys, several of my agents use it, you all, and everybody just loves you guys. And so I appreciate it, but I also appreciate that you've put out and give the people the knowledge too. And that shows your worth to me, that, you'll still spend your time, even if it doesn't benefit you. I do that a lot of times. People call me, okay, will you just give me some advice? Absolutely, and I give it to them. And so
I talked to Guy today for 2 hours almost on how to maneuver some issues that he was having, and we're happy to help.
What are some of the, you had started to say don't settle. What are some of the things that you don't want them to fall for? Things that, the don't fall for that. You were kind of telling me about that a little bit earlier. What are some of the things that, if I'm setting you up at the right time for that?
Sure. And so the phone calls that we receive, there's always a recurrent theme. And one of the things is that we hear over and over, no matter what county it's from, well, it happens more in some counties than others. They'll go in there and either the appraiser or the appraisal review board will say, the state is telling us that we have to raise the value on your property. There are very few circumstances where the state will impose a value on a specific piece of property. So be aware of that and don't fall for that. If they're saying that, then ask for the documentation that backs that up, because that's very intimidating. When you can kind of pass the blame on someone else to say the state is telling me, that's a whole different ballgame. And I think it shuts a lot of people down and intimidates them.
On that note, before we move on, guys, it's about 7:02 right now. So if you want to start submitting your questions on Facebook, I think we got a little bit of a delay or whatever. If you want to, we're going to go through a few more quick things. But if you want to start getting your questions in so I can go to them, so I can ask them, start doing that now if you don't mind. I'll scroll back up, see if I've missed any. I hadn't been watching the feed, but start getting your questions in now so we can try to maybe wrap this thing around about 7:30 or so. So get those questions in. And speaking of, I've heard some changes, and I with tax code and law, and I've heard that, because of the not being able to raise things without a certain percentage, without rollback elections, all this, that the fear that was that a lot of appraisal districts were going to try to just stick it to everybody as much as they could to get as much money as they could before these laws, hamstringed them and stuff. Is that something that you can speak intelligently to right now, or something we should do a little more research to? I've just been asked that question, and I didn't want to answer it because I didn't feel fluid enough to give a correct answer on
I think what they might be talking about is more about the taxing entities and their taxing rates. The 2019 legislation that was passed, there was a huge bill, SB2, that was passed that is coming into effect this year. And so that's changing a lot of things in the appraisal process. But that's really geared toward the taxing entities and their ability to not increase from like 3.5 to 8%.
Tax rate side versus okay.
Exactly. So appraisal districts are still tasked with determining appraisal value, fair market value as of January 1st.
So it's more so worrying about the taxing entities jacking their rates up because they're about to get hamstringed.
That's what I believe that would be what they're asking.
Gotcha. Okay. I just wanted to ask that one. And I'm sorry I cut you off on after the don't fall for that, the tax thing. Was there other ones on that one, or did we reach the end on that one?
I think that the main things to just not fall for is things that don't smell right. If it doesn't make sense, have them explain it to you. If it still doesn't smell right, ask for more information, get more details, but don't automatically fall for any blanket, the state's making me do this, or the state provides the appraisal district's software and formulas, because they don't. It's things like that you just need to be aware of, and that's where we kind of can come into play in helping you to understand the tax code and these appraisal practices that are supposed to be in play. Because there's a lot of times and a lot of instances where a property owner will call me up, and I hear this over and over, or the real estate prices went up 15% last year. Well, my data doesn't suggest that. And are they looking in a specific category of property? Have they, looked at all these other
actions? 8% increase, yet mine went up 27.7%. And
yes, and even the increase that you were calculating isn't accurate for your property type. So there's a lot of data that goes into that and understanding, and that's what people need to realize is this is a really robust system, but these are all universally accepted appraisal practices, and that if something doesn't smell right, maybe it isn't. And just ask questions, and you'll either get the answer or seek further remedy.
Gotcha. Well, I do have a question for you from one of our Facebook viewers, and I think we kind of touched on it a little bit, but we'll loop back around. The question is, Texas has some type of limit either on appraisal value or total tax rate. Can you clarify? I think that may tie into that 10% homestead, but I'll let you answer that one. This is your ball game. But
so what I'm understanding from the question is they're probably talking about the 10% homestead cap, and that's just saying that they cannot go up on your taxable amount more than 10% year over year.
They can raise your value, however, but
exactly.
If you filed your homestead, they can only make you pay up to a 10% increase every year.
Exactly.
Got you. And then that total tax rate thing that she may be talking about is what we just talked about on the politician side, where they may be getting their hands tied a little bit on what they can, how much they can raise them without a rollback election.
Without voter approval. And they changed the language to make it easier for people to understand, but yes, it's essentially the same thing, and they'd have to get voter approval to raise it above that
Gotcha.
rate.
I don't know if you're the one to ask on this or not, and I may have asked you the last time we talked, but I'm very bitter about that VISD backdoor tax that they did on everybody. When you had a hurting community and they knew it, and they went back and they used a loophole because of the emergency situation to gig everybody on taxes. Well, it was supposed to be a one-time thing, and I'm sure it was. But here we are again in an emergency situation, and have you heard any talks of VISD or anybody else looking to take advantage of any of these loopholes again to stick it to us?
I haven't heard anything on the local level with any of the surrounding counties, but I do know that statewide we're kind of looking for direction on whether the economic disaster declaration allows this provision in the code that's in there for instances of like Hurricane Harvey for taxing entities to increase their tax rate. That has not been ruled on, to my knowledge, as of today, as of airing. So we're looking for direction on that, but I haven't heard of anything locally. I would say pay attention to any upcoming meetings as things go on, and just realize that in our opinion, taxes are a necessary evil. So the school district has to get funding somehow. So you have to balance out what's going on, pay attention to your values, and then pay attention to any meetings upcoming about the tax rates.
That's a whole nother talk for school choice and all sorts of other things that we'll get into. So while we're waiting on some more questions, is there any, once again, while we got a little bit of break here and instead of hitting it at the end, how do they get in touch with you? What is let's start with your, give me the company, one more time,
Sure.
Since I butcher the name every time. Give me the company, phone number, all that good stuff, and while we wait on a few more questions here.
So the best and easiest way for people to sign up, if they're ready to make that decision, is to click sign up now on our website, which is junekconsulting.com, JUNEK consulting.com. It's JUNEK consulting.com. There's a link right up the top that says sign up now. That'll allow you to retrieve your property information, enter your contact information, and electronically sign our forms to get started. They want to kind of talk more about our process and what we do. The office line is 361-574-7037. And one of our senior consultants or other property tax professionals can help them talk through it, but what we typically do is take the ball and run with it, is what I say. So we try and make it as easy on the taxpayer as possible. We're going to file your protest in any appropriate forms. We're going to do, and what's really kind of different than most property tax consultants is we visit every property that we represent and take exterior photos. So we like to have intimate knowledge. We're a family-owned and operated business. We're talking about these properties all the time. Like, I think our family gets so bored at how much we talk about property taxes, but we like to know our clients' properties, and very oftentimes I'll know exactly who their kids are, what they're doing, what's going on.
Yep.
We're family-owned and operated, and we like to treat our clients that way. So we're always available by phone. The majority of our clients have our cell phone numbers. They'll text us, they'll call us. We're happy to help with any questions that can come up along the way. I would recommend that folks, if they do want to look at engaging our services, they do that ahead of the protest deadline. We like to make sure that the appropriate issues are protested and get that in. And it also helps to ease up the appraisal district scheduling, because they have all of this stuff going in, and it's really difficult to start pulling out one protest by one to transfer to our representation. So I would recommend, if you are going to or considering signing up, give us a call now, especially since the protest deadline is rapidly approaching.
Coming quick. You need to stall for me for just a second because y'all threw me on this Mac, and I'm scrolling down here to get onto the Shaw page because I got we've got some questions there, and I was looking on the other page.
Sure.
So let's see here. Do you do commercial property?
We do. I absolutely cannot recommend, whether it's us or another property tax consultant, you really need representation on a commercial property. The methods that we talked about today really just are out the window. You're really going to be looking at the cost or income approach, and taxpayers don't have access to the skill set to understand those valuation methods and the data and tools to come up with those valuations. So absolutely give us a call, and we could talk about your specific issue, whether it's we have almost $2 billion worth of properties in our representation, so we do everything from dealerships, apartment complexes, all the way to houses with 3 walls. So we've seen it, and we're happy to help.
What if they lost their protest form? Where do they get a copy of it?
You can Google it. So it's a state comptroller form.
Google it.
Type in Texas property tax protest form. I think it's form 5132. If I'm going to rattle that off, I'm not sure.
Can
just
you call
Google
the CAD
it
and ask for a second?
You can, and again, as long as you have the appropriate information, you can even handwrite this. So you're going to want your name, the name that the property is listed under, your property ID or property address, and then reasons for protest. Sign it, date it.
Which they can find on victoriacad.org, and then go to the property search and to find their
property ID. Sure, yep. or again, your address, any kind of identifying information. You should be fine to do that.
Do you guys do business personal property as well?
We do. We do a ton of work, especially in our area for oil field companies. That is a ton of equipment to be managing. So we help them establish values and make sure that those are correct. And we can help just about any kind of issue you may have with business personal.
I've got a question. Should I file to appeal even if I don't think I will appeal?
I don't think that anyone should purposely waste the appraisal district's time. So if you want to pursue a protest, then pursue a protest. If you get in there, and again, we protest values that may not necessarily go up, but we feel should have maybe gone down the previous year, or there's some issue. If you get the data and it suggests that your value is okay, then okay, but don't do it willy-nilly and just, do it and forget about it, waste their time. I would be respectful of their time, actually look into the information that you're requesting, and look into your property specifics.
Gotcha. So the question is why, I got another one. Why has everyone's tax appraisal gone up so much, and why this year? Because we always see jumps and whatever, but a lot of my calls that I got this year, including my own, were huge, huge. And I mean, they're always kind of, but I mean, the ones across the board this time were just brutal. Like, they just came out with a big old bat and smacked people around. Is there an answer, a rhyme, or reason of why this year just across? I mean, like I said, most people that I've talked to, I mean, it wasn't, we went up 5,000. It was, we went up 40,000, 50,000, yep. 60,000. Like,
I've had multiple increases of over 100,000 in just calls in the last 2 days. I don't think it's specific to this year. We see these kind of increases every single year depending on the property type and the data supporting that. Again, this is all supposed to be data driven. So there's something going on with your property type or something to where when they look at them, when they apply their mass appraisal technique, it's increased those properties.
How do they, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but how do they, my neighborhood, for example, they've got 2 or 3 houses, 20, 30, 35 grand higher than anything that's ever sold out there, ever. Like,
sure.
I mean, how do they come up with that if nothing's ever come,
Depending on the appraisal district, they may reach outside of the neighborhood to try and find other comparable sales that may be different, but I would certainly argue hey, this is my specific neighborhood. Mm-hmm. If there's, say a neighborhood where there aren't a lot of sales, they can kind of go further out. So they might even look at an older sale, which I would still argue would maybe not be appropriate. my opinion is if the data isn't there to support an increase, it shouldn't have increased. But that might be something that you're looking at, is some additional neighborhood information being brought in.
Got you. Good answer. And I'm going to kind of rapid fire on these now that I found
Sounds
the
good.
whole nother set of questions that I didn't know was here. So how many, I've had 2 people ask now, how many comps should you bring in with you to I mean, I would assume the more the merrier, as long as they're going the direction you want them to, but
Sure.
you know, generic answer.
You need a representative sample. So don't find one comp that is your neighbor that's down the street that's lower than you. You need to have a representative sample. So for sales, the appraisal district typically provides between 3 and 5, and for equity, you might see anywhere from 6 to 9. So it just depends on what you're looking at and the information available to you.
Okay. All right. I've said we've got somebody, we have a shop with 2 acres on a crappy private gravel road. How can I find properties similar to compare? Our appraisal value went up $15,000.
I would need to see the property specifics, but you'd really kind of need to lean on a property tax professional that understands the characteristics of your property. Like, for example, I would look at your property and then compare it to what I have in my system and my knowledge and database of a comparable property. So it's a little bit more difficult for someone in a rural area to really kind of understand what that might look like.
Gotcha. Somebody else says, my market value went up $45,000 this year. Is there a goal dollar figure to shoot for during my protest or appeal, so we know what is considered a low ball figure? You know, so when they jack you up like that, where do you know? I mean, if you don't do this and you don't really, where do you go? You know, you don't want to if.
Exactly. So again, this kind of goes into play of where it does benefit you to have a property tax consultant. And I'm not trying to do this spiel, but we just simply have access to more data, tools, and experience to understand what that might look like. So we can figure out to the dollar what the target value for that property is. If a property owner is going in there blindly, they have somewhat of an idea, they know it's too high. I like to get it right. That might look different for any single property. So for example, if this property, it might be right, or it might be needing to come down $5,000 based on equity or $23,000 based on sales. I would look at each property individually. There's not a hard and fast answer of a percentage. It just depends on the property type and the data supporting it. And there's not really a way for the property owner to check that on their own. They're going to have to trust the appraisal district to supply that value based on the comps.
And you know, and so much of this system just for the taxpayer and even the CAD and stuff, it seems like a system that everybody set up to fail in. You know, the taxpayers, you know, we're piled under a bunch of crap we don't understand with a bunch of information we don't know how to get to, and it's on us to go fight it. And then they're piled, like, they have to come up with every single value in town, and they don't have all, you know, it just seems like everybody's blindfolded running into each other here. And
it feels that way until you understand that there is an entire code book of laws and different things in appraisal practices. There are rules that if they're followed, this system will work. It's when you start seeing issues with adjustments or issues with, kind of the state's overview of the property value study. They're checking for a level of appraisal, and it again is opinion of value, but we're trying to make sure that everybody's following those rules, following the appraisal standards so that it is done correctly. Because if it is done correctly, the system works.
Gotcha. Where do we get the property description you talked about that lists the items on your property? Because that does not come in your initial letter.
You're going to be able to find a very general, depending on the appraisal district, information on the appraisal district website. You can usually just type in whatever the appraisal district's name is, CAD, and it'll pop up a property search. Search it that way. That's going to be a very general overview, but you're really going to be able to hammer in on the specifics once you've requested the evidence and can look at what we call an appraisal or property card.
Do you service more than Victoria County?
Yes, we're in over 35 counties, so we'd be happy to help.
They took a bit to my. Oh, yep. Sorry, I'm catching. Yes, we're on a bit of a delay. So yeah, I'm trying to catch up with everybody here. I think you guys back in control. Y'all tell me if I missed anything, but I think we are caught up with the questions and stuff. Do you have any final tools, tips on your way out. Again, guys, thank you for tuning in so much. This is all new, this virtual stuff, and so thank you for tuning in. You are welcome to reach out to her. You're welcome to reach out to us. I am probably going to refer you to her if I can't answer it, because a lot of this stuff just aggravates me. But again, thank you for tuning in so much and taking the time and realizing that, I hear a lot of times that, and I'm going to say it one more time, I know you're probably sick of it, but a lot of my friends, hey, I don't care about politics. I don't want to get into it. I don't, whatever. Well, politics care about you. And this is a prime example. And again, match your fury with this to discuss your politicians. And some of you may want higher taxes, and hey, good for you. But the ones that don't, again, fight the fight on both sides of it. Fight the CAD, but then also talk to your politicians and hold them accountable. Kinsey, and let's see.
I'll do a quick recap.
Yeah,
you got a question?
Do it. Nope, I thought I did, but we didn't.
So we believe taxes, again, are a necessary evil. So what we're looking for, and what I think everybody else should be seeking, is to not pay more than your fair share. If your property is appropriately assessed, then that's fair. If you're paying more than your fair share, that's when there's an issue and that you need to proceed with remedy. In summary, be brief, stick to the facts, make sure that you have evidence to support your opinions, and be respectful and appreciative of their time, and don't back down. If you feel like something's not right, then proceed and see what you can do to get some tax relief.
On protest form, question 4, it asks, what is your opinion of your property value? How do you determine that without hurting your protest?
Do not ever fill that out, in my opinion, because at this point, when you've done your protest, remember how we kind of talked about this process you go through?
Right.
You don't have that number yet. So I don't recommend, unless you have done a recent fee appraisal, never fill that out, because you don't know that number yet, and you'd just be taking a stab in the dark, and you'd really be setting yourself up for failure once you get in there and they're saying, oh, well, you thought your property was worth $500,000, so therefore we're pretty close and it's okay. So I recommend leaving that blank. Again, in your protest, you really just need to identify the property and the reasons for protest, and I would certainly leave that blank, because again, you haven't done the legwork to see what that number would be.
Gotcha. And we touched on this, but again, what percentage of tax savings should I expect to pay a consulting firm if the tax is decreased? So again, what are your fees on, but I think this is a good thing to hit again. How do you get paid in this equation?
Sure. So we charge, the simplest way to look at it is the difference in what you would have owed versus what you would owe after our services. So we charge 50% of the savings for a residential property, and that might look different depending on your exemptions on the property, but say we reduce your value $1,000, like roughly the math would be $200 in tax savings, and we would charge $100 of that. So our fee structure is, again, structured in a way that our goals are aligned, and you will never be paying more by engaging our services. You're either going to pay what you paid the CAD and we won't send you a bill, or you'll be able to split that savings with us for doing a good job. And for commercial, we charge 30% of the savings.
Gotcha. We've got, will we get the appraisal card just by sending in the notice of protest?
No.
No. Okay.
No, you need to request the evidence. Otherwise, they're going to get to work on your property and try and knock out your protest. There's a very tight timeline that they're doing this, and they're trying to certify the roll, or 95% of the roll, by July 25th. So request that evidence. Otherwise, you're not likely to see anything except for an offer that you don't know what it's based on.
Gotcha. Let's see. You can request. Oh, that was somebody telling somebody else something. I think we are just about done. How many properties? Yep. Kinsey, well done. I want to thank Steve and Jake as well. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the camera to put all this together and make it look good, and they did a great job. Thank you, Wallach, for letting us use this fancy little office. Looks very nice in here. Yeah, and again, guys, thank you for the help and the support on all this. And bottom line is we're here for you, and we want to help. But more importantly, we want you to help yourselves, and we want to empower you, and we want to give you the knowledge to be a part of this and be able to find some victory in your life with it. And so that's about all I've got. You got anything you want to say in conclusion?
I just want to thank you again for having us, and I think it's fantastic that you're putting this out in the community. So
well, I'm very blessed, and again, thank you all for joining, and it's my pleasure to do this, and guys back there in production, making it all happen, making it look good. Well done. It's a lot of hard work. Guys, I think that's about it. This is our Shaw Realty virtual tax seminar here. And again, please reach out, message us, call us. If it's too complex, I'm going to forward it to her over here. But thank you. And again, don't go in there and just go fight with them for the sake of fighting with them. Be kind. They're people just like you are. They got a job to do. And you know, I don't think very many of them like just sticking it to you for the sake of doing it. You know, it's not like they wake up every day and just want to know how they can ruin people's lives. I don't think it's that. They're just trying to do a job too. And just like in a lot of ways, I think we're set up to not succeed. I think they are too. And so a little bit of kindness and compassion and will go a long ways, but toe the line, you know. And like I said, if they try to steamroll you, then do what you got to do, you know. And so, anything?
You're good.
Anything?
No, give us a call if you need help.
Give her a call if you need help. Caleb Shaw, Shaw Realty, Homes for Heroes, and Junek Consulting.
Got it.
We'll see you at the next one, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.